Welcome to the Assistant Lab podcast, hosted by Victoria Racken and Anel Martin.
This podcast is dedicated to the executive assistant profession, the good, the bad, and the ugly.
We've created this podcast for the outliers, the linchpins, the assistants who are serious about their careers. This is a podcast for those who are preparing for the future today.
This is a space for no-nonsense content, benchmarking and tracking industry and world trends, as well as interesting interviews with exceptionally inspirational people. The goal here is to stimulate new ways of thinking and being in this profession.
So, on with the show.
Welcome to this next episode of the Assistant Lab. This podcast is not just about having people who are from an EA or PA background. Sometimes we interview people on matters relating to our working and personal lives. This week's guest is the amazing Emily Broadbent, who works for the UK charity Pregnant Then Screwed. This was a charity set up by Jolie Brearley as she was sacked from her job by voicemail 2 days after she informed her employer that she was pregnant with her first child. Naturally, what should be an exciting time for any woman ended up being something that was ridiculously scary, unemployed with bills to pay and a baby on the way. But she realised that her experience was not unique and then launched Pregnant Then Screwed on International Women's Day in 2015. This was a space for mothers to share their stories of discrimination. In this day and age, you'd think that we would be quite far down the journey of eradicating this, but there's still much work to do. And we know that it's not just women in the UK that experience discrimination through pregnancy, but all across the world. I invited Emily to come and speak on the podcast. Emily runs the support services for pregnant women for the charity, and we talk about her background. As with all our podcast guests, we like to go back to their 16-year-old selves. Emily also spent time in Africa volunteering with a charity and working with women and mothers who had been left homeless due to poverty. She then obviously came back to the UK and started working for Pregnant Then Screwed. And we talk about modern Britain and the fact that 54,000 women a year lose their job simply for getting pregnant. 390,000 working mums experience negative and potentially discriminatory treatment at work at the hands of their employers every year. So we get right into the stats and facts around this. We look at the provisions around childcare in the UK, and we're talking about the recent research that's been released about women going through fertility treatment and being punished by their employers. Emily also offers some really great advice to mums-to-be, because even if you're somebody who doesn't have children, this matters to us all. And there's lots of initiatives you can help get involved in if you are a UK assistant listening in, and you will find lots of links in the show notes and on our social media posts. So enjoy. Well, good morning, Emily, and welcome to the Assistant Lab. I'm so thrilled to have you on because this is such a special charity, and I know we're going to talk about all that, but I just want to give you a really warm welcome, first of all. And it's something we should have done more on in the assistant and talked more about in the assistant industry before, but we never have. And the irony, of course, is that we're 96% female to 4% male in terms of our split of gender in the UK. So we've got a lot of people that will become parents and mums and or are pregnant at the moment or have already been there, done that, got the t-shirt and now supporting, via being a grandmother. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to getting stuck in with you today. So thank you for giving up your time for us.
Oh, of course.
But with all our podcast guests, it doesn't matter what background you've come from. We always like to go back to when people were kind of 16 years old and what you were thinking about career-wise, because obviously in the UK, at 16, there's all this pressure about, are you going to go to college, uni? What do you want to do? What is your career path going to be? So what was happening for you, Emily?
Exactly the same thing. The pressure of trying to decide what I was going to do for the rest of my life. It was absolutely mad. And now looking back on it, I think, what was I thinking? was I actually thinking? I had so many different routes that I was going to look into. I wanted to be a fashion designer, and then I wanted to be a teacher. And it was just like, you know, I was constantly backwards and forwards between the two. So in the end, I know we're going to come on to this a little bit later on, but one of the things that I ended up doing was I went to Africa for a little while, and I've been to Africa a few times, but this was the first time that I'd been. And while I was over there, we worked with one of the local schools and with the school children there. And I just had such a heart for them and for the education that they were getting and the learning experience, but not just that, but how they viewed it. And it was really eye-opening. So I kind of came home from there and thought, I'm going to be a teacher. That's it. That's my career path. And education in both sides of my family. So it just felt quite natural. So I went through the whole process of applying for uni and working really hard to get my A-levels and doing all of that. And I did primary education at university. I was dead set. I was like, this is my career path. This is where I'm going. So there was no open-ended degree. It was primary education, and that's what I was going to come out with. And I was in education for 1.5 years. And that's how long it lasted before I just thought, no, this is not actually for me. So that was kind of my 16-year-old self. And I wish now that I'd not felt the pressure or not let the pressure get to me about what I'm going to do for the rest of my life, because it's a really hard decision to make at 16 years old. You've not experienced the world yet, have you? And I still don't feel like I have.
No.
I feel like I've experienced the world. So it's a very tough decision to make as a 16-year-old.
It feels a bit bonkers now. Like when we go back through this, but it's not, I mean, it's not even necessarily parents. It's been our education system that are like, make these choices. And I spoke to a lad I went to secondary school with not that long ago. We sort of connected on LinkedIn, and I remember him talking at the time about how he wanted to be an astronaut. Like for most of secondary school, he was going to go off and be a British astronaut. And we caught up recently. He's a police officer now, but he was like, do you remember like seeing the careers advisors and how we had to pick what we wanted to do? And I'm like, it does make me think now, like, will parents, this generation of parents, not put so much pressure, be a bit more that, you know, kind of, well, you may want to go and do this and do this course at uni, but that might be not where you end up in, you know, at some point, because it's just not linear, is it now?
No, not at all. Not at all.
Well, you've had some fascinating things happen in your working life, and we know that you've touched upon it already, spending time in Africa, volunteering with a charity that works with women and mothers who'd actually been left homeless due to poverty. Like, tell us a little bit about that, because that must have been quite overwhelming at times emotionally to deal with, like, to see and be around this. And we know it is happening a bit in the UK now, but completely different, I appreciate. But what was that experience like?
Absolutely. It was a very heartbreaking experience. It was very humbling. I learned a huge amount from that experience. It's not something that I would necessarily go into in great detail. I'm very aware that these women shared a lot about their experience with me around substance abuse, around domestic violence. And these are parts of the reasons as to why they are homeless and living the way that they are. So it's not necessarily something that I would ever go into great detail about, because I do feel like it's just kind of honouring their experience a little bit. But for me, I think that the huge learning experience was around the strength that we have as women and as parents. It was really overwhelming, actually, to see how strong these women are. In fact, I don't want to kind of use that in the past tense, but how strong they are as women, as parents, because the situations that they had experienced, I can't even comprehend that. I really, really can't. So I think that was probably, for me, where I learned the most, in just how they dealt with those situations.
And then I guess you must have been reflecting on that whole experience coming back to the UK and just, you know, and obviously different things happen in different countries, but there probably would have been some similarities, and there's been some definitely tough times, but it must have sort of changed the course of your career and made you think about where you were going next, having been, you know, through that type of experience?
Yeah, absolutely. And it really did. So for me, I think I had such a heart for women, and I had such a heart for women who had been through challenging circumstances. So interestingly enough, actually, I went from that. This was kind of around the sort of time that I was in the depths of teaching, but knew that I didn't really want to be. So my career path outside of teaching, it started off as a bit of a panic, send my CV out to every possible place that I could imagine, because I knew I just didn't want to be in teaching, but had no clue where I wanted to be. And then I ended up I ended up applying for a job as a support worker for women who had gone through, who had faced human trafficking or had experienced modern day slavery. So that was actually where I ended up going after being a teacher. So I kind of used the experience that I had had in Africa and the learning that had taken place there, and sort of used that to drive a passion in a new career path to help women who had also been through very, very traumatic and difficult experiences in a different way, but still trauma that they had experienced. So kind of weaving my career path into that. And then that went from being a support worker there to working at Pregnant and Screwed, and obviously supporting women who are experiencing difficult situations in their workplace. So still very female focused, which I love. But yeah, it's really interesting how that experience in Africa has weaved so many different career paths, but still the focus has been on the strength that we have as women, and making sure that women are encouraged to achieve and to do just the best we can with what we've got sometimes.
Yeah, it's incredible, really. And obviously you work at Pregnant and Screwed, and I have been watching this charity almost since inception. And some people might find that strange because I'm not a mum. And I've been very, very open about that with the EPA members. And I just think I first came across Pregnant and Screwed via wearethecity.com, run by Vanessa Vallely, and she's my mentor. And I think she'd done one of her inspirational interviews with Jodie, your founder. But having been in the workplace for a long time, I've seen obviously what friends and family have been through, and, you know, as kind of working parents, and what they go through whilst they're pregnant in the workplace. So I think first and foremost, tell us a bit more about the charity and what it's aiming to do. And I mean, it's been achieving big things in a short space of time, really, hasn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. So the charity itself is kind of split down the middle. So we have the comm side and we have the support services side. So the support services exist so that no woman ever feels like they're dealing with pregnancy or maternity discrimination alone. And as part of our campaigning arm, we want to see childcare reform, we want to see better parental leave systems, and we want to see better flexible working legislation. So the reason why they're so important to us is that we believe that they're the biggest contributing factors to seeing a culture shift in the workplace.
I think it's been, I mean, I'm literally full of admiration for mums. I know what I've witnessed and seen my friends and family go through. But looking at modern Britain as it is today, I think most of our listeners, whether they've been mums or not, or are going to take that journey, will be quite shocked to learn of the statistics that 54,000 women a year lose their jobs simply for getting pregnant, and then 390,000 working mums experience negative and, well, potentially discriminatory treatment at work each year. If this is one of our listeners that's currently one of these women going through this, how do they get support? Because that must be overwhelming. You know, you've got this great news that you're pregnant, you're going to be a mum, your life's going to change, and yet you're having to face this in the workplace. What's the first port of call in terms of support?
Yeah, I mean, it's a shocking stat.
And my mind was blown.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, to be honest, I've seen it multiple times, and every time I see it, my mind is still blown that it is as high as it is. I mean, it's shocking it is shocking how high it is, and it's mainly due to the misuse of NDAs. Women haven't been allowed to talk about this, so the number is shockingly high. But we are really excited that there is a call to evidence on this. There's a call to evidence on the misuse of NDAs, and we'd actually want to encourage anybody who has signed one to respond to the call to evidence. We actually surveyed 500 women who had signed an NDA, and 90% of them said that they would be happy for people to know what had happened to them. So again, that is a really high statistic based on women who had signed NDAs themselves. And again, a really high stat on the negative impact that it had on their mental health, which is completely understandable when you think about what they have had to sign. So yeah, I mean, in terms of access and support from Pregnant and Screwed, that is the area that I oversee at Pregnant and Screwed. I oversee the support services. So we actually have a number of ways that people can get in touch and receive support. The main ones that we have that most people know about are our advice line and our email advice services. So they are for people to access who are wanting some HR related advice. Mm-hmm. So that is anything from redundancy to flexible working requests, to discrimination, to standard maternity pay and holiday entitlement. So we can kind of deal with all those sorts of queries that come through on the advice line. And then anything that is maybe requiring a little bit more legal support or a bit more legal advice. We do also have a team of solicitors that work with us on a pro bono basis. And anyone who is referred to the legal team actually gets an hour free session with them where they can discuss that legal need and get the advice that they need from that as well. So they're kind of like our two main services that we have access to from at Pregnant and Screwed. We also have the mentor program. So the mentor program is designed to support women who are going through the tribunal process, so the employment tribunal process. And as part of the mentor program, we do ask that as part of the case, it does involve pregnancy or maternity discrimination. It's just based on the experience that our mentors have. But the mentor program is very much peer-to-peer emotional support. Similarly to the advice line, we do have access to the legal team as well, so they can speak to a solicitor if they would need to. But as I say, it's very much peer-to-peer emotional support, someone who has experienced it themselves and will kind of hold your hand through that process and take just take a little bit of the stress and answer any of those questions that you maybe just aren't sure about. Something really simple like, what does it look like in the room at the court that you go into? Or, what is this call about? Or what does this mean? Just those little questions that we sometimes don't always have answers to.
Yeah.
Program. And then the last one that we have actually just launched in the last couple of months, we have a benefits advice clinic now. So we have a benefits advisor who offers 15-20-minute sessions. You can book through the website, and she offers specific advice around the benefit system, what you can claim, what you maybe aren't eligible to claim, how it works, how you can go about applying for it, and everything that's in between with the complication of the benefit system. So we've got loads to offer for people, make sure that we're supporting as many people as we can, as well as other things that are in the pipeline, which I can't share with you yet, but some really exciting new services that we've got coming up as well.
That support framework is just incredible. And I know this charity came out of what happened to your founder, Jodie. I've read her story many times, and the fact that there is this support out there, which a lot of women probably still don't know about, despite the high profile campaigns that Pregnant and Screwed has been running. And I'll wait with bated breath to see what else you bring out. I think it's really nice to get this out to as many women as possible to know they're not on their own. And the benefit system, you may as well be trying to interpret another language now, trying to get through that, even if you're not pregnant, and just trying to look at standard benefits. So that the fact that you've got this specialist support as well to help women navigate that, I think it's incredible. I think it's shameful actually, the state of our benefit system, and that it's so difficult now. But to have these key support services will definitely be waving that flag for you to the assistant community, because I just think it's amazing. Now, in terms of people like me and any male assistants listening as well. You know, it doesn't, obviously me not having children doesn't mean that I don't fully support my friends, my family, my colleagues who are, you know, going through pregnancy and becoming mums. How can we be better allies? What can we do to kind of support them? Because obviously we can be there on the end of a phone and WhatsApp messages and things like that, but any tips to those of us that want to do the best we can in terms of that ally role?
Yeah, I mean, you know, there's so many things that we can be doing to, you know, from spreading the word to raising awareness to starting a petition, writing to your MP. We work with so many incredible organisations that we are now, many of them we're now partnering with. So even things like supporting their work, because that it helps us all work together and make sure that we're meeting the needs of mothers. And even think, oh gosh, I'm trying to think of so many other examples that I could give you, but encouraging your workplace to get proper training. We offer training for employers on how to better your system for working parents. People who are in management positions, culture comes from the top. So one of my colleagues was explaining to me the other day about leaving loudly. So no one really wants to play that game of desk chicken. So if a manager is saying, right, I'm going to be leaving at 4 o'clock, they kind of open the door for others to do the same. So of course, that's just one very simple way of doing it. But as I mentioned before, that culture shift, it does come from the top. So if you're in that position, you have the ability to be able to do that and to make that change within your workplace.
Absolutely. I mean, I've spent a good chunk of my EA career in HR and seeing it from that viewpoint as well. And I've definitely shouted. I've never been one to be quiet, Emily, to be fair, but I've definitely done it in that capacity to help some of my colleagues. But, you know, I think the fact you offer training to help HR departments, because, you know, talking and thinking about the HR side of it, sometimes it can be a little bit too processed and forgetting about the other stuff that can shape and make it a much more smoother, harmonious process. And in terms of, you know, giving that good service so that these women might actually want to come back to you, you know, as a good employer and employer of choice for working mums. I think I'm still stunned that all this sort of carry on is going on and that mums have to go through that. It should be one of the nicest and happiest times of their lives going through that journey. And yeah, anything we can do at EPA and certainly in the UK EAPA community to get your work out there and spread the good message, we're totally on board with that, 110%. So we'll be there. I want to talk about childcare now.
Yes. Who doesn't love talking about childcare?
I'm literally, my mouth is on the floor talking about the provisions around childcare in the UK. I mean, let's not beat around the bush. They are poor beyond measure. And this is not just recently. It's almost been snowballing downwards for years and years now. It's something, again, I've seen my sisters go through. My sister's an NHS nurse. She's on maternity leave at the moment, actually. Friends, colleagues, you know, one particular story, actually, is a really good friend of mine. We used to work together years ago. And the provisions around childcare was so bad that she had to give up her career completely. I mean, it just didn't tie up the finances, I mean, everything. It just nothing pulled together to be able for her to be able to carry on her career, and she had to come out of the workplace, she felt, for a couple of years. And it is nigh on impossible for some women to work and juggle this. And I know that our current Chancellor Jeremy Hunt recently announced a £4 billion expansion of free childcare for preschool children, but this is from 2025, which is still 2 years away. What are the charity's thoughts and positioning on this and these recent announcements? Because I'm not an expert on this area. But it doesn't seem like it's the solution to it ultimately.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very complicated subject.
There's
pros and cons. The positive is that they've made the connection between encouraging women who want to be in a workplace environment and affordable childcare. So they've made the connection that by making childcare more affordable, more women will feel encouraged to go back into the workplace, those who want to. But the concern is around the proposed budget just not being enough to cover what is actually needed. So it's been estimated that it's actually going to cost double what they've budgeted to properly invest in the childcare sector. So providers aren't going to be able to remain open if there's not enough investment. So some of the data that we collected on this showed that 1 in 3 parents have to rely on some form of debt to cover the cost of their childcare. 1 in 5 parents said that the cost of childcare is more than half of their total household income. So, you know, there's positives to the budget, as I mentioned before, but the concern is around the finances that have been budgeted and it just not being enough to fully invest in the sector itself. So not only is it not going to make it affordable for parents if they don't invest properly, but it's also going to mean that these providers aren't going to be able to stay open. So the proper investment would mean affordable childcare and would mean sorry, I'm trying to think of the best way to explain it. It would mean affordable childcare, and it would also mean that the providers themselves can remain open and also receive the right financial support.
And that's one of the things, you know, you talking about the providers there. I got chatting to, and this was a month or 2 ago now, about a local provider in Dorset, which is where I live now. And she said, obviously, with the cost of living, the increase in bills and insurance and, you know, costs for having the staff as well, these fabulous childcare assistants. And she said it's just got so bad that she's making financial loss every month and she wasn't sure how much longer she'd be able to keep open. And there is, you know, and I've also read press stories over the last kind of couple of years that a lot of people are leaving childcare as well because they can't afford to work in childcare because of the disparity around salaries. And again, I go back to it just seems totally mad. Even me, as somebody that doesn't have children, but I want part of this tax money to be invested and properly. Your children are our future doctors, nurses. You know, could be a future prime minister there. Who knows? But I don't get why we've become so anti-children in the UK. That's what it feels like. And I'm an outsider to the whole parenting sphere. It feels like we've become anti-child. And for the figures, for the research you're uncovering, and I bet it's even worse, there's probably mums out there who are still petrified to speak up about what they've been through. There's probably childcare providers still trying to battle as best they can and to get through this period. It's just really disappointing, but thank God we have charities like Pregnant and Screwed who are leading the way, because I love the way you guys campaign. I just think it's brilliant, absolutely brilliant. The more the better. The fact you have to do it is sad, but
it is, yeah, it's incredibly sad.
Yeah, absolutely. I was quite disturbed, and I've actually found it really quite heartbreaking about some other recent research that your charity's released, and this is specifically around women going through fertility treatment and being actively punished by their employers. But again, I've known a number of friends of mine to go through fertility treatment. It's emotionally, physically, financially, spiritually, I mean, it just takes everything out of you going through that, especially as a woman. I was really stunned. I've not seen any research on this part of it before. Can you tell us a little bit more about the research and what you've uncovered? Because it's quite recent, wasn't it, this being published?
Yeah, it was. So the survey that we did was actually part of our State of the Nation survey, and that was carried out 2 or 3 months ago now. Can't remember specifically, but it was 2 or 3, it was this year. So it was very recent. And one of the topics that we discussed was fertility treatment. And from this, we found that 1 in 4 women undergoing fertility treatment experienced unfair treatment in their workplace. And this isn't something like, being missed out of the tea round. These are women who have been pushed out of their jobs, have been denied flexible working requests. And we also found that 22% of women who told their employer about experiencing pregnancy loss also experienced unfair treatment in the workplace. So it's almost as if employers are seeing women who want to or who have children as a bit of a burden. Actually, research now shows that senior women in teams increases financial performance. So you won't have anyone on your team like this, or giving you that increase in your financial performance if you're going to push everyone out who is or is trying to get pregnant.
It's crazy. So what are the next steps with the research? Because obviously it's made some bits of the national press. Are you talking to Whitehall about this? And is it, again, do we need to get the kind of word out to employers, HR departments, leadership teams?
Yeah, absolutely that. So one of the things that we're currently looking at doing is we have just started a new project in partnership with Best Beginnings, and it is currently funded by the DHSC, and we are developing an accreditation scheme for employers, specifically around fertility treatment and pregnancy loss in the workplace, and we are providing them with tools and resources to make sure that their policies and systems that are in place are in place in a supportive way for women who are undergoing fertility treatment or have experienced pregnancy loss. So the whole part of this project is very specific to those two areas. And that is kind of just one of the things that we're doing. Obviously, things like raising awareness through the press and media, supporting bills that are going through Parliament around law changes to do with fertility treatment and pregnancy loss as well. So this is just the beginning for us. Once we get started on something, that is, yeah, that's us. In it.
I love it.
Something changes. So this is very much just the start. But one of the things that we're really passionate about at the minute is making sure that these workplaces have the resources to hand to make sure that they are supporting women who are going through this. Because it's, as you mentioned, it takes everything out of you, absolutely everything. I haven't experienced it personally, but I have very close friends who have, and I've watched them go through this, and I've supported them however I can, but it can't just be on friends. Employers have to have a say in that as well. They have to do something that's going to support them and take the load off them a little bit, so that they're not having to think about another thing on top of everything else that is going through their heads.
Yeah, it's the last place you need to be getting hassle and negative connotations from your workplace. And again, it just kind of beggars belief that this is going on. And I think the worrying thing is how many women we've lost out, highly talented women we've lost out of the workplace because some of these issues and the childcare and and losing good talent. I mean, you think that alone would get leadership teams going, but our profession can certainly help chivvy up and get the word out on that. So thank you for everything you've shared about the charity. We'll fully be backing you, anything you need. And lastly, you are a mum yourself, Emily. Didn't you have a child during one of the lockdowns? We had so many lockdowns in the last few years.
Lost track of which one.
Was that your first child during the lockdowns? Or
it was, yeah. So I had my son in the height of the very first lockdown.
Wow.
I remember them saying, the government releasing some announcement that women who were in the third trimester needed to isolate, and I literally hit my third trimester on the day of the announcement. So it was very, very early on in the pandemic and very late on in my pregnancy. So the two did not line up very well at all.
I mean, I was thinking back to the women that did give birth during those lockdowns, and I've read bits and heard mums call in to radio stations that I listen to saying how tough it was and isolating, and that you didn't get to do some of the normal stuff that you might do in the first 6 months to a year of being a mum. That must have been a really, really weird time, frankly.
Yeah, really weird. I mean, my mum didn't hold my son for the first month of his life.
Wow.
And it was partly fear on my part, but also, as I say, it was the first lockdown. Everything was so unknown. There was so much fear mongering, and there was so much uncertainty, and there was so much out in the press about even just pregnant women or babies COVID and some horrific things happening as a result of that. And so I think, you know, especially as a new mom, fear just took over every part of my body. And I didn't leave the house. I didn't see friends. I didn't see family. And yeah, it was about a month later when I finally had a bit of courage and confidence in me to allow my mum to hold my boy. But it took a month. And now looking back on that, I think that was crazy.
I know.
Crazy that my mum didn't hold her first grandchild for a month of his life. And thankfully he was a very tiny baby, so he still looks really small on the so thankfully, you know, I could kind of pass it off a little bit. But my mind isn't going to forget that. No matter what photos show, my mind isn't going to forget that first month, that really crucial period. And also as a new mum myself, that first month was really difficult. Through the pandemic, going through even just my birth. I had a really traumatic birth with my little boy. My husband was only allowed to stay for 2 hours after my little boy had been born, and then he wasn't allowed to come and visit me. And then the next time I saw him was when he was picking me up at the doors of the hospital. And I had to like walk out with my little boy myself after having this really traumatic labour. And then, you know, stepping into motherhood, but with no support at the time. I had no one around me. I couldn't have anyone around me. So that was really, really challenging.
I bet you new mums built up a lot of resilience off the back of that period, because tough. I'm not sure how I would have dealt with that, to be fair, just being completely honest with you. And lastly, I'd like any advice out there to new mums that you have to share, any tidbits, anything that you think might help, because some of our members are pregnant at the moment and they're full of excitement but overwhelmed and a bit of anxiety.
Oh, well, congratulations to those that are. It's lovely. I have so many things that I would say. So many things that are maybe a bit practical, but I think the one thing that I have learned from both my children, I've had a child in the pandemic and a child outside of the pandemic. And the one thing that I don't think I've ever, until about 6 months ago, I don't think I had the confidence to do was ask for help. I think it's one of those like really cliche things that whenever you hear someone talking about, have you got any advice for new mums, it's always to ask for help, and that always seems to be the thing. But I actually think it's really practical advice and really something that as women, as mums, we don't always have the confidence to ask for. And I know for myself, this is just me speaking personally, but I can be quite stubborn. My husband will attest to that. I can be quite stubborn, and I definitely think pride was a big part in all of this. And I just spent a lot of the early months and probably years now not asking for help, even from grandparents. I wouldn't do that. And over the last 6 months, I've kind of had to say to myself, you need to just get over it a little bit, get over the pride of asking for help, get over the fact that you think you can do this all on your own. And I'm not saying that you can't, because you can 100% do this on your own if you need to. But for those that are able to, seek support, whether that be from family or friends, whether that be from organizations, if you don't have a support network around you, but seek help. The feeling of being overwhelmed, the feeling of anxiety can really take a hold. And if that isn't eased in any way, shape or form, it can lead to a lot of negative mental health issues. And this is me speaking from experience. I had postnatal depression and PTSD. I was on antidepressants. I went through trauma counselling. Like I'm speaking from experience here, and I know what that did to me and what that did to my mental health and what that did to my new experience as a mother. So asking for help has actually made such a huge difference to my mental health this time round after the birth of my daughter. And it's helped me and my husband connect. It's helped me spend quality time with my son while my daughter was being looked after, and vice versa. So it really has made such a huge difference this time round. I think that would definitely be.
That's such an important but lovely piece of advice to give out, and especially in this kind of Instagram social media world where projections of perfect mums and everything's going
A
fine.
highlight reel. That's what Instagram is. It's a highlight reel, and people say, "Oh, look, my baby slept through the night." Great for you. My daughter's 1.5 years and she still hasn't. Like, that's fantastic. But social media is a highlight reel, and I think the more that the older I get, the more I realize that.
Yeah.
The more I realize that that is not someone's day-to-day life, and actually behind one beautiful picture of a smiling baby is probably hours and hours of tears on both parts and of people who are struggling with breastfeeding, or people who are struggling with their mental health, or, you know, there's so many factors behind that one picture, for sure.
No, thank you for sharing that. It will mean a lot to members who are going through pregnancy at the moment, or are new mums and have recently given birth. Thank you for such an incredible interview and agreeing to be on the show today. I'm really looking forward to getting this episode out widely to the assistant community. We will link everything you mentioned, the charity website, in our show notes, and some of the research you've talked through as well. But I think you can safely say that our profession is going to get right behind Pregnant Then Screwed. Anything we can do, we're there. And I look forward to seeing a society in the future that is more supportive, more accepting, and fully embracing new mums, pregnant women, working parents. That's where we need to be, and I'm just sorry that we're not there yet, but we're going to get involved and help on this journey to get there. So thank you.
That's amazing. I can't wait.
Thank you for joining this episode of the Assistant Lab. If you enjoyed this content, you know what you need to do. Feel free to share it and help us grow our subscriber base.
Join us again next time, and until then, keep experimenting, innovating, and improving your skill set.